What's up, guys? This is Janel Lamb, and this is the Fear Not, Do Right podcast. Today, I am joined by a very special lady, my own mom. It's a little before Mother's Day, but we're just going to get after it here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I'm super honored to be here.
It's been a long time coming.
Yep.
And I mean, and especially since you've been here kind of through the whole, like, hey, I think I'm going to do a podcast, now into being on the podcast.
And I love being a podcast guest, so this is going to definitely be my favorite.
Well, you've had a lot to go on podcasts for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, between being so if you don't know, my mom is like the Mean Girls mom, where she's like, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. But you actually kind of are a cool mom. You're a 2 times published author,
Mm-hmm.
and you have done many women's seminars and
Yep.
speaking engagements, and you kind of get to be there with Dad through all of his
In fact, we're leaving
crazy
on
stuff.
Tuesday to go do one in Wisconsin.
A podcast or a
Seminar.
seminar?
Yeah, we're going to do some breakout sessions with sheriffs' wives, and Mark or Dad will do them with the sheriffs, and then he'll keynote, and we'll just kind of support people.
That's super cool.
Yeah, for some sheriffs and their wives in Wisconsin. I'm really looking forward to it.
So for people who know me and don't know you, or just any listener who listens to this and doesn't know who you are and where you're coming from, where does your story start?
Well, I'm originally from a small town up in Minnesota. So our roots are small town, suburb, country life. I was a country kid, ran around shirtless for the first, 6 years of my life, probably. Had farm animals and lived in a log cabin and all that stuff, that whole lifestyle. Moved to Arizona when I was 7 and then became a city kid and was a dancer, a hairdresser. I mean, like a ballet dancer, hairdresser.
Usually a different kind of dancers associated with hair girls.
Right. Did hair at home with the kids. To help supplement the income and fulfill my artistic creativity side. And we raised 5 kids, five of you little kiddos. And then got into law enforcement, got into politics, and here we are.
And when she says that she raised 5 kids, it's not like most people where they have, 5 kids over the course of their lives. I think there's only 6.5
Yep.
7 years between
6.5 years between you and Dayton. Yep, between the oldest and the youngest. No twins. Nobody's even 2 years apart. So we decided to just take what the Lord would give us and ripped it off like a Band-Aid. And then we were like, whoa.
Yeah, and then the youngest 2 are
a year and
Wyatt
5 days
Dayton
apart. Yeah.
Almost Irish twins on St. Patrick's Day.
Yep. So I had my hands full. So that was a big chunk of my life, I feel like, was just being a stay-at-home mom, raising you kids. And just, when I realized that this is what we're doing, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm all in on this. I'm going to completely focus on this. Someday, they're not going to be here with me all day, every day like this. So it kind of just leaned into it. And yeah.
Did you always have that vision growing up? Like, yeah, this is kind of the trajectory that my life has taken?
Yeah. I always wanted to have a family, a decent-sized family. I always envisioned myself with multiple kids. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. So, big families were normal for me. And I love being a homemaker. I love cooking. Well, I don't love cooking. I don't love thinking about what to cook for dinner, but I like cooking of the dinner. I also don't like cleaning it up, but I'll cook. I'm a domestic person. I like, clean house. I don't mind doing laundry. I like taking care of people. That's my thing. I'm an Enneagram 2. I'm a caretaker. So
What is an Enneagram?
it's a personality test.
Oh, is that like the Myers-Briggs?
Yes.
Thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm more of a nurturer. I'm more of a caretaker type person. So it fit me very well to just, have a family and be a stay-at-home mom. That's all I really wanted to do for that season of my life. So
awesome. And now what was it like planning that out with someone like Dad before he was Sheriff Lamb?
So we both really embraced that. I mean, I've always felt like, the the husband needs to earn the living and the wife's more suited for taking, at least for the two of us, that's how we always felt. And going forward, that's the kind of the roles we set when we started out. And we were very fortunate they were able to do that. So I definitely consider it a privilege that I was able to stay at home.
But, if you've read, you've published 2 books now.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, what I can't remember the title.
The Sheriff's Wife, Holding It All Together Behind the Scenes in Politics is my first book.
And that kind of, I read the first half of that one because then it just got too weird because it was like I'm reading this weird, it's like when you look into like a funhouse mirror of yourself and you're like, it's like this weird different perspective and it feels distorted, but it's, probably more accurate.
The same experiences, but on a totally different perspective.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would be trippy for the kids.
It was pretty weird reading to that, even to just that point, like reading about the financial stuff that you guys went through and reading about it's just like the parenting stuff and the relationship. I'm like, dude, no, like that was not like that at all. I don't know where you're sourcing this.
We were all living in the same house, but it's amazing how the same family members can have a different experience with the same experiences. It's very, very weird, but I think that's pretty much normal, pretty common.
So what inspired you to write that first book?
Well, Dad was writing a book. Sheriff Lamb was wanting to write a book. He was wanting to start doing more public speaking, and that lends itself more to being an author, published author. So I'm more of the, it's one of my, I don't want to say my talents, but one of my strong suits is words. Like if you need me to write a blurb for something, tell me what your bullet points are and I will write you a beautiful paragraph or 2. And so it helped him. I was helping him to write his book, just, trying to just craft the message a little bit. And he was, in the process of that, he was like, why don't you write a book? No one ever hears about the perspective of a law enforcement wife or a politician's wife, especially. And, as I kind of tossed it around, I thought, he's really right. Like there's really nothing out there. And as I was going through the experience of supporting him while he ran for sheriff the first time, even the second time, I had no context. Like I had nobody that I could call and say, hey, what kind of event is this? Or what do you wear to this? Or who are these people? Like nobody to help me at all. I went into every situation completely blind. And you go into these, different groups, like Republican club groups or social groups where he's going to go speak and just let people get to know who he is. I mean, that's what you do in politics. And I would go along and you're walking into this room of 50 people, 150 people, 250 people, and you don't know a single person when you start out. Like we weren't in the Pinal County social circles at all. We had our kind of just our own little circle, but when you start really branching out, our county is huge. And I would go in and I'd be like, gosh, I just feel like just such a fish out of water, just having no idea who these people are, and I thought, gosh, I'm going to write the book that I wish I had. If I just write about my experience, I know it must be very similar for many, many people all around the country. And so that's what I kind of set out to do, was write the guidebook that I didn't have. And I think it was a good concept, and I'm really glad I did it. Yeah.
And I mean, not just in this context of being, the sheriff's wife or a politician's wife, but you also talked about a lot about, the before he was even in law enforcement and your experience there, which I think is a lot of people don't see that, especially when they look at who you guys have become. It's like,
right. Like I really wanted to make sure that people understood who we are as people. Like we weren't born into anything. Like we aren't anybody special. We're just regular people with regular family, regular career. And that didn't really stop us from doing what we felt like we needed to do. And I was hoping that concept would give maybe somebody else who's thinking about, they have that little spark in their heart, like, oh, I really want to do XYZ, whether it's go back to school or, try a new career or start a business or run for office, whatever it is. You don't have to be predisposed to that. You can just do it. The path will line out for you once you make the decision, put it out in the universe. Stuff will start coming your way and you can do it.
were there many decisions that kind of reinforced that concept for you leading up to things like running for sheriff or now running for Senate?
Absolutely. So I think that's actually one of the most important things about taking a quantum leap or running for office, especially. You have to have that. I mean, I call it for, for everybody to understand, I call it that you just have to have that God moment. So I write about in the first book how for me, everything can look okay on paper, but if it's not right, it's not going to work. The timing has to be right. You've got to be able to do it financially. You've got to be able to do it logistically. If you're, I never understand the people who are in politics who say, oh, I'm not really a people person, or they'll say, oh, he's really introverted, but he's running for whatever. And I don't really understand that, but if they feel like they should do it, then do it. But, for me, that first real moment where I knew that this was absolutely 100% the right thing that we were supposed to be doing. We were at our very first event, and I was standing there with the clipboard because you have to collect signatures in order to get on the ballot to run for office. So I was the annoying clipboard lady. You see the clipboard people and you just start walking the other way, don't make eye contact. I had to get out of my comfort zone and be that person. But we started with our first event was at this thing called Polar Fest, which is held at the local junior high. And it's just like a winter time. There's nothing polar about Arizona, but it's like a wintertime event with rides and stuff for the kids to do. And so we go to this. It's our first thing. He had just filed his paperwork to become a candidate. So we had all the papers for people to sign. And I was kind of standing off to the side watching, for friends basically to come in my comfort zone. Like, I know if I see people from church or whatever, I know they'll sign it. I don't have to approach any strangers. And I looked over and I could see him talking to a group of people that were just acquaintances, people we knew. And it's almost like I could see this light shining down on him. And I know that just sounds so cliched or cheesy or something, but I literally saw that. And my stomach did a little flip-flop. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is right. This is what he's supposed to be doing. I absolutely knew in my heart of hearts that it was the right thing to do. And then after that, you kind of get to where you're like, win or lose, this is what we're supposed to be doing. Running for office is what we're supposed to be doing. And then to add to that for the Senate, so I was waiting for that moment when we decided to run for Senate. Because on paper it looked good, like logistically, yes, we can make it work. Does it seem like the right thing to do? Yes, but I hadn't had that confirmation yet. And I haven't actually talked about this very much yet because we've only been running for a couple weeks, so I haven't had much opportunity yet. But I was kind of looking for that, because what happens is if you don't have that, when you have those really, really bad days or weeks, which you're going to have, you absolutely know are coming, you have to be able to look back on that and remember it and be like, it's going to be okay because this is what we're supposed to be doing. A friend had sent me a little video clip of him, 2 video clips, and they're posted. You can find them, of him down at the border. It was when he was down there with Carrie Lake when she was running for governor, and they gave him a chance to talk to the press. And the stuff he was saying was a lot of what he normally says, but he added in a few things that I was like, this is new. And I thought, this is the message. This is the message that he needs to be getting out there. And then they had another press conference at that same event, and he said some other things. And same thing reaction. I had that little flip-flop in my stomach, and I heard what he was saying, and I thought, this is the right thing. He has to do it. And from then on, I was like, okay, let's do it. All in, eyeballs deep. Let's dig our own grave, whatever we're going to do.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. But you have to have that confirmation where it stops you in your tracks and your stomach does that little twist and you're like, oh crap, we're doing this. Oh.
Did you have one of those moments when he initially told you that he was going to get into law enforcement?
Yeah, kind of. Like I really, we had never even, I think I had asked him probably years before, have you ever thought about being a cop or a firefighter? And he was like, no, I don't want to work for someone else. I want to do my own businesses. I want to have my own thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. That's how you are. That works. And then when he went on that ride along and he came home and he said, I want to be a cop. And I was actually relieved I mean, we had 5 young kids. I mean, so Dayton was 2, so it would have made you like 8, 9. So we had all these little kids. It was a feast or famine lifestyle with working for yourself. And I was just grateful to have a steady paycheck and vacation time and a 401k and a retirement and health insurance and all that stuff. So for me, I was elated when he got into law enforcement. I was like, yes. And I thought, man, my life is set out before me. This is perfect.
What was
naive.
What was going on before that decision?
So he was doing pigeon control. So he had this truck and he had the signage on the truck, and he would go into these neighborhoods where just pigeons were just. And pigeons are horrible. Their poop carries like 26 deadly spores or something. And if they're perched on the edge of your house, and this is what a lot of the houses have, their pigeon poop is dropping down right in your entryway or right across the front of your sidewalk as you walk into your entryway. That gets on your shoes and you take it in your house. Like, it is very disgusting, and you can get really sick from it. Or if they're perched on the side of your house and it's dropping onto your air conditioning unit, that's then blowing through your house. I mean, pigeons really are a problem here in Arizona. And the way our roof lines are and with the solar panels, it's very easy for them to make these nests. So it was a real need, and we saw that need. And so that's what he was doing. But he was up on these roofs. He'd clear out all the nests and the babies and all the stuff, kill it all, and then block it off with the wiring and the spikes and whatever. It's a pretty dangerous job. But what would happen is he'd be parked at someone's house in a neighborhood doing it, and he'd have 4 people stop by. And it's like, oh man, dude, I need you to come to my house. Can you come tomorrow? And so he was just getting business like that. So it was actually not bad business. It was a good business, but when you're not working, you're not making money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. That's hard to keep up long term, especially when you have a family. You're totally self-employed. You don't have any benefits. If you get hurt, what's going to happen? It was dicey, even though it was a good business.
Would you say it was more dangerous than being a cop?
Definitely. I mean, I think he almost died more times doing pigeons than he did as a cop, because he'd come home. I remember one time, it was during the winter, and he went to do this older woman's house, and he got there in the morning, and it had been freezing cold. And she goes, oh, I hosed off my roof for you. Well, it just turned to a big sheet of ice. So he gets up there, and he's trying to work around this now ice slab on this tile roof, and he started sliding, and he was 2 stories up. And luckily, it was late enough in the day that some of it had melted, and he caught a rough spot and didn't fall off the side of a 2-story roof. Not tethered on to anything. There's no safety net at the bottom. It was
dumb.
Scary. It was scary. And there'd be times where he'd be on a second story where he'd climb the ladder up to the first level. Then he'd have to pull that ladder up to a second level and climb a second level ladder on a roof. I'm like, it's really dangerous. So when people are like, oh my gosh, are you so scared you're going to be a police officer? I was like, no, thank goodness. 2 feet on the ground, bulletproof vest, officer safety training. I'm good with it.
So how was it for you when just being at home doing what you got to do when he first started, because he was out at Salt River doing the stuff. What was your experience as the wife of a law enforcement officer? I mean, anybody in an armed profession, there's that unknown factor, that risk factor.
I would ask him every now and then. I'd be like, is this really what are the chances that something really bad's going to happen? Because my worry was more when he was on patrol, because, you pull over a car and it's just unknown every time. It could be some little lady that's just trying to get home in a hurry, or it could be someone who just got out of jail and they just hit up with meth and they're not going back to jail no matter what. So you just never know what you're going to get. So that probably made me the most nervous. But he would always reassure me and just say, look, we're very trained. I follow every officer safety rule. And if I follow my training, I'm going to be okay. And, who's to say that I don't get killed on a family vacation sometime, or sitting on the couch eating a Dorito and you choke and die. Like, if it's your time, it's your time. And so that helped me just to remember, like, God has a plan. When it's your time, it's your time. And we'll cross that bridge if we ever have to come to it. And thank goodness he was always safe.
What was your guys' approach to raising 5 kids then? Because like you said, I was 9, Dayton was like 2 or 3. So what was your guys' approach to handling 5 young kids?
So it was kind of, being a police wife it's hard because it's a whole family thing. So you probably don't remember as much because you were in school. So he was working graves. So he'd work like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. basically, or 6 to 6, maybe it was 12-hour shift, 6 to 6. So he'd leave for work because of the drive and just getting there and all that stuff. He'd leave right after you guys got home from school, or right before you even got home from school, and be gone until 6 in the morning. Well, then I still had younger ones at home, like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So to let him sleep, we would leave. So we'd take you kids to school. We'd go to the gym. Kids go in the daycare. I got to do my workout, which I was very fit at that time because it was like every day I had to go to the gym, and then run my errands. And then about that time, he was starting to wake up and we'd come home. So it was a whole family schedule for sure.
Yeah. Now, did that change going from where he was at with, because he initially out at Salt River and doing that thing, did that change on the family dynamic for you guys when he decided to run for office?
Yeah. So then it was working 24/7. It felt like, he was gone all day at work. Because when we decided to run for sheriff, he had to step away from the sheriff's office for a multitude of reasons. One, there's a resign to run policy. You can't be a deputy in Pinal County and run for sheriff at the same time, nor would you want to. You can. There's ways around it, but he was just like, no, it's not worth it, and I don't want to catch any extra unwanted attention from management, so to speak. It was not a hostile situation, but they're not going to make it easy.
Right.
And
right.
Why would they? So he stepped away. Plus, a deputy salary is not very much, especially back then, because now that he's been the sheriff, he's been able to get the guys raises that they hadn't had in 11 years. So back then, he was making very little. So true to form, started another pest control company on the side because, of course, working 312s and then 412s just was not enough work for this workaholic man. So he was doing a pest control business on the side. And then the night times would be, he was marketing out of town. I don't know if you remember that. That's when you were probably like 15, 16, working out of town, doing marketing and basically door-to-door sales, but was able to make a really good living doing that. And then when he was home, we would be full blown doing sheriff's activities, running for office.
What was how are you handling yourself in that situation when you have a workaholic husband like you have and like a lot of people have? What were you doing and what do you do to like kind of just to ground yourself in that situation?
I can't say it was really the easiest time of my life. It was actually really difficult. So during that time when he was working out of town and running for sheriff, I was a flight attendant and doing clients, like I was doing lash extensions and hair in my home salon and had all 5 of you kids. So he was working out of town at that point. He wasn't quite running for sheriff. And that was a difficult time. Like, you're just going to have those difficult years, It was right when you left on your mission that he put in his paperwork and ran for sheriff.
Yeah, because I wasn't around for any of the first campaign.
So he was gone a lot because he was working out of town. And then right after you left, so you were the oldest. So Sadie was just like in high school and you had just left on your mission. And that's when we started running. But before that, it was a grind of him working out of town, me flight attending and doing clients and doing my best with you guys too.
So what would you consider, what was the thing that was more or less keeping you together?
I don't feel like I was very together, to be honest. I don't feel like I had it all together. Honestly, it was almost like it was just so busy. You couldn't even breathe. You just had to just go and just know that this was a season and it wasn't going to be forever. And just kind of just day by day, just kind of pull up your bootstraps and just go every day. Luckily, we had our faith. I mean, really, that's it. That's all we really had.
Now, what was like the effect? I mean, going from just working steady law enforcement into working around the clock into launching a campaign, what was the effect on, because I like you said, I wasn't here for any of that. So what was the effect on the rest of the kids when you're working, to keep it together? He's working to make it all happen. There's 4 more kids. What was the effect on them?
I actually, when I was writing the book, I asked all of the kids, I said, hey, give me the down low. Like, how were you feeling during that time? What did you experience? Like, were you secretly angry at us for being so crazy and putting you guys through the microscope and all that stuff? And to be honest, they were like, we're fine. We don't even remember. They were, so Sadie was in high school, so Cooper was maybe like a sophomore, and then the boys were like 7th, 8th grade. I think they were secretly happy to be just left alone and be like, I mean, what kid isn't going to be like, hey, I'm just going to sit here and play video games, order me some Little Caesars. I mean, we lived on Little Caesars. The kids lived on Little Caesars because I would try to go as much as I could, to the events and different things. We just kept in contact as much as we could, and I would go as much as I could. I would try to just balance it, and I would kind of feel it out day by day almost. Like, does it feel like I need to be home tonight? Yeah, I'm going to stay home tonight. Or does it feel like everyone's doing something? Yeah, we're good. I can go tonight. So I just kind of played it by ear, basically, and just felt out the situation and try to just listen to my gut and tell me where I needed to be.
Do you think there was anyone that it had a harder impact on than the others?
Well, I definitely feel like stuff fell through the cracks. I feel like the schoolwork suffered. But as far as like people, like the kids doing okay, I think they did okay. Just because we have good kids. Like we've just raised good kids. But I think they all struggled in their own way. Probably Dayton and Wyatt less so, and Sadie and Cooper more. Those are hard ages. And those are hard ages no matter what. Sophomore, junior, those are hard ages to even exist at all, let alone if your parents are really busy.
Right.
But we, kept an open line of communication. Luckily, we had cell phones. We were always available. And if anything needed to be done, I was there to do it. So,
was there anything that you guys tried to do, like anything that you deliberately tried to do to see success in raising teenagers?
I really just think giving teenagers grace is hugely important. I think back and I think if you talk to very few people who fondly remember their teenage years or think, man, I really had it all together when I was 15. You know what I mean? Like, I think everybody struggles as a teenager. I was just like one of those easy, even kids. Mark was a very even, easy kid, but it's still really hard. And the stuff that kids are going through nowadays is even 10 times harder. 10 times harder. So I just feel like loving your kids is all you can really do. Like, that's all you can do is just show them what the expectations are, guide them to what you feel is right, and hopefully they'll follow along.
So when you say grace, it's not just like a laissez-faire.
Not a pass.
It's not a pass.
No.
Not just like a laissez-faire.
There's still consequences for your actions. But, my dad was what's known as a hard ass. My dad would be the kind of person, like if you, like one time I didn't give my mom a phone message and my brothers got dropped off at Downey's dugout in Mesa for batting practice for t-ball or baseball or whatever they were playing. And the team decided not to go. So they were there for like 20 minutes before the message got back. Cause this is before cell phones, back in the 80s. And so, my mom wasted 2 trips to go pick them up, and it was inconvenient for everyone because I didn't give them the message. I just couldn't be bothered. I was 15, whatever. Who cares? It's my little brother's stupid t-ball practice. I don't care. I got around for 3 months for that. And it wasn't like, we're going to ground you for 3 months, but in about 3 weeks, we're going to let you start doing things. It was a hard grounding for 3 months. I did not socialize outside of the school hours for 3 months for not giving a message. Like that kind of stuff.
I think about that now, and not socializing with anybody for 3 months actually sounds really nice.
Seriously. But as a 15-year-old,
right.
Death sentence.
That's almost kind of cool though to have like the resolve as a parent to just be like, you're done for 3 months, and to actually
I know, right?
hold out for 3 months.
I don't think I would have even had that, but I tried to never give those kind of crazy punishment. Like I always wanted the punishment to fit the crime. There has to be consequences that align with the mishap, And it's like, okay, was this something deliberately terrible that this child did just to be spiteful or be mean or, be stupid? Or was it just an honest mistake?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to always weigh that out.
Was there any, are there any good examples of that from that time period?
Do you want me to use one of you?
I don't care.
Well, let's see. I do remember the one time we had told you about this Instagram page not to make.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. And we had said, don't do it. You need to take it down.
Hey, guys, we're back. We had some technical difficulties, but you were just saying about something about Cooper and an experience you guys had there as far as showing teenagers grace.
Yeah, so he was our hardest kid, middle child, wanted to do whatever he wanted to do. And as a parent, you just feel so much parent guilt all the time. So I actually had the opportunity to ask him once he had kind of started to mature a little bit and was doing much better and had kind of gotten the other side of some things, some addiction and some other, just trying to get his life all together and go straight, which was awesome to see. But I asked him one time, I said, hey, what could I have done better as a parent? Like, should I have been more strict with you, or should we have been less strict with you? Like, what could we have done better? I said, because I have parents ask me all the time, how did you do it? Or, they'll say stuff like, I'm raising my grandkids because my child is on the streets or in jail or wherever. And I said, I'd like to have, some insight to give folks because, all I know is my own experience. And he said, Mom, kids are going to do whatever they're going to do. Like, you can't really stop them from doing anything they want to do. You can't lock them down, especially once they get to a certain age, especially once they get to 18. And then they're really legally able to go do whatever the heck they want to do. And all you can do is hope that you taught them right. And sometimes their actions don't really reflect what they've been taught. And so he said, I really feel like the best thing you guys did was just always love me and give me a foundation that was built so that I always knew who I was and that I could always come back. Like I always knew I had a place. And for what it's worth, that was somewhat comforting. It's like you kind of expect your kid, you ask that loaded question, you don't know what your kid's going to say. They're going to say, no, you were too easy on us, or no, I rebelled because you were too strict or whatever. But no, he just said, no, you couldn't have been more strict or less strict. He's like, I was just going to do what I was going to do, and I had to figure it out. But at least I had a foundation to build on, and I knew who I was.
Do you feel like you had any added insight dealing with those situations, especially with Cooper, with some of your own siblings?
Yeah, because my siblings struggled as well, for totally different reasons, but they made a lot of the same bad choices. And everyone has kind of turned out okay. And unfortunately, not everybody makes it out alive from their bad choices. That's the hardest part. But you truly cannot control another person. All you can do is do your best. And I think if you're a parent that's worrying about if you're doing your best, you're doing your best. It's the ones that don't care. But if you're really stressing about whether or not you're doing the best for your child, I promise you, you're doing the best for your child.
Are there any metrics that you would, I don't want to say grade yourself by, but essentially metrics that you would grade yourself by as a parent to be like, okay, I know my kids are here at X, Y, and Z, so that's a win. That's a success. Or any areas where you would say, okay, they're deficient in X, Y, and Z. Here's an area that I need to improve in.
What's funny is I think your expectations start to lower with what you expect out of your kids. I mean, and I've talked to other moms about this, and they have corroborated the same feelings. When they're little, especially being LDS, being Mormon, we have all these ideals. Oh, my child's going to graduate from high school, and then they're going to go on their mission, and then they're going to come home, and then they're going to go to school, and they're going to get married. And there's like this whole life plan set out. And you just naively think as a young parent that that's just what you're going to do. If you do your stuff, if you pray together and you eat together and you support your kids and you make sure they, get good grades and try to do your best and all this stuff, that all those other things will happen. And I'm just here to tell you that that's not the case, because one thing that we have, for better or for worse, is we have agency. We all born with the ability to choose for ourselves the path that we will go, no matter what we've been taught. It's important. The teachings are so important, but it's up to each of us to do what we're supposed to do. So one way I explain it, and I had this kind of epiphany a couple years ago, and I thought, if I were to do something, say I were to commit a crime now, I would not blame my parents for whatever crime I committed, because my parents raised me correctly. They were strict, sometimes overly. And, I could go do whatever I want. If I want to go down and shoplift from Walmart, I can go do that. Am I going to do that? No, of course not, because I've learned that it's not worth the hassle. Like, why would you do that? I wouldn't bring that upon myself. So I wouldn't blame my parents for my poor choices. Why am I blaming myself for my kids' poor choices? My kids don't blame me for their poor choices. When they do things I don't like there's still things to this day that my parents don't like that we do. My parents still wish me, almost 50 years old, would do things differently sometimes. That's just the nature of feeling like you raised a person a certain way and you want them to act a certain way. And it's just not a thing. That is not a thing. So I think kind of gaining that perspective was really helpful to me to eliminate a lot of guilt, a lot of parent guilt, that all I can do is my best to raise them in their formative years, to be there, teach them the values, teach them who we are as a family, teach them who they are as a person. And above and beyond that, that's where it ends. And it sucks. It sucks. Sometimes it's like standing by and watching a train crash. You're just like, there's nothing I can do. But our job is just to love them.
How do you think that ties into principles of accountability? Because like what you said there, where you can't blame yourself, you can't blame the consequences of your decisions on your parents, and you wouldn't blame, and so you can't blame the consequences of your kids' decisions on yourself. But there's a lot of kids nowadays who are claiming that I'm this way because of you. I'm this way because of your parenting.
Well, and I know people like that. I do know people like that. And I think that sometimes experiences we have when we're younger kind of influence the way we are as adults. I definitely think that's true. But at the end of the day, you really are an adult with your own life and your own agency. And it's up to you to figure out how to be the person that you want to be, sometimes in spite of what you've gone through as a kid. And instead of playing the victim, and that really goes back to a lot of kids don't have consequences. We have taken consequences off the table for kids. We've taken accountability off the table for kids. You know, it used to be if I was going to, like when I was in school, in elementary school, if I were getting a bad grade, I would be afraid of what my parents would say. Nowadays, if a kid gets a bad grade, the parent goes in and reams the teacher. Why did you give my kid a bad grade? And we've taken that accountability away from kids. And so now they're getting into adulthood and saying, you know, well, it's everybody else's fault because that's how they've kind of been. And I'm not saying that older adults don't do it too. There's just people who just don't want to be responsible for their own actions.
Right.
And so it's doing that deep dive into who you are and why you're making the choices you're making. We all have agency for good or for bad. And so it's time for people to take stock in, stop blaming and playing the victim and take responsibility for your life.
Well, you're a perfect example of that too, because did you talk about it in your book with your mom?
I did with my, about my parents' divorce and all this stuff. Like everybody has a huge load of crap that they have to wade through.
Divorce is a soft word for that situation too.
It was rough. It was rough. It was the breakup of a family. It was a lot of anger. It was a lot of fighting. It was a lot for us young kids to be going through.
How old were you?
I was 9. My brothers were 3 and 5. It was hard. It was very difficult. And looking through it through adult eyes now, I see a lot more clearly what was going on and why people acted the way they did. But when you're a little kid, you don't know that stuff. When you're a little kid, I mean, I will admit I was a little bit wise for a child. Like I could still see, I had a little bit more perspective than I think the normal kid has. This is how I am. But I can see now why things were where they were, but it doesn't take away what I went through as a child. And what it did for me was when I saw how the adults in my life were acting, I took more of the attitude of, I'm going to do better. I'm going to be different. That's just the way I approached it, and trying to use it as an example of what not to do. Instead of falling into the trap of repeating bad cycles, use it as a way to springboard into something different and something better, hopefully.
Well, even your siblings, I feel like, have likewise been pretty well adjusted through that ownership and accountability.
For sure. I mean, we not only had a divorce my parents divorced, and there was 3 of us. My dad remarried. My stepmom, who I love to death, had a son. And so then we were a mixed family, and then they had 3 daughters. And so then we were a fully mixed and blended family. I mean, there is not many harder ways to grow up than a mixed and blended family. Like, it's really difficult. And I think under the circumstances, my dad and stepmom did a pretty amazing job. But it was challenging. Like, it was very challenging. The power play between the kids, a second marriage with a stepchild. Like, it was just a lot. It was a lot. But now as adults, we love to be together. We're not together a lot. We all live kind of all over the place, but we made an effort this last summer to all get together, and it went pretty well. Like, there's many families who, in this situation that I know personally, that don't even speak to each other. And we're all, for the most part, I would say a pretty tight-knit group with all things considered.
Do you think that's a result of having your dad being a hard ass? Or do you think that just comes from individual perseverance through, almost like a cohesion through adversity? Like, you guys all kind of went through the same stuff together, so it's like, hey, we're in this together kind of thing.
Kind of. And I think it's a real testament to my stepmom for just loving everybody, taking care of everybody, and just loving everybody. Even when they didn't deserve it. I think love goes a long way, a lot longer way than people realize. Um, yeah, everyone kind of went through their own different hardship of the situation. Um, we had one of those situations where there were so many of us that I had a different dad than my half sisters had, a totally different dad. He was in a totally different place in life. He had totally different life experiences by the time they were around. So, and was totally different career. I mean, totally different, almost everything. And so we've all had to kind of make our own peace with our own crap we had to go through. I don't know if there's one factor that really held it together except for just love. And we do get along. Like we have common ground. We love to like quote movies, and we have a lot of shared experiences because we went on vacation together a lot growing up. We have a lot of things that bonded us in good ways. So that was very helpful. The love.
What was it like for you and your brothers with the other half of that situation with your mom?
I think it was tough. I think it was a situation where you just have to say, you know what? I don't know why any of that happened. I chose to just forgive. I just chose to forgive her. She decided she wanted to do something different, and it took years. I didn't just be like one day, oh, I'm just going to forgive her. No, I had to go process all this stuff on my own. One kind of really hard thing was when I had children that were ages of 3 and 5 and 9 and saw on a day-to-day basis just what they needed from a parent. And then, thinking back to my own experience, it was when me and my brothers were those ages and realizing what we didn't get. It made a lot of things more clear, but it was very hard to process. I definitely went through, I would say, several months of time where I was pretty unhappy, just dealing with it, just your brain just processing it in the background at all times. I feel like our brains are always processing, and when you're processing negative emotions, it kind of tends to spill out. And so I had a hard time. Like I had a hard time when my own children were those ages, and to think of what kids those ages we were what we were going through, it was very hard. It was difficult.
Now, what did you say? So obviously there was a good resolution through all that, kind of leading up to. I mean, just here in the I think it's been a year,
almost a year since my mom
months.
passed away. Yep. Yeah. You know what's funny is I just think everybody realized, my dad, my stepmom, my mom, me. I can't speak for my brothers, but I think everyone was just like, you know what, life is short, and let's just be cool. Let's just why hang on to hatred? And that's how my mom was. Actually, she was very she didn't hang on to grudges or any of that stuff. I mean, for a while, but then you look back, you're like, dude, it's been 40 years. Come on, like put it away. We were young. We did things we did, and you can't change it. So just moving forward, just let it go. And I think we all kind of took that attitude, and it really made things better. It really did. The only time you're not healing is because you're hanging on to stuff that you can let go. And you can let it go. It seems like you can't let it go. Like some hurts are deep. And those hurts were deep. I have every right to say I will never forgive my mom for leaving a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I could feel totally justified in that attitude. But I just can't do it. She did what she did because she did. And I may never know why, and it's really just not important now. They have to work through their issues. I worked through mine, and it's just better to just be happy.
Would you say that has had a pretty significant impact on the way you parent?
Oh, absolutely. I realized what kids need, and I wanted to make sure and give that. And I had other examples of people in my life where I was just like, family members where I was like, I don't like how that feels when they act like that. Adults. I'm never going to act like that. I really did try to be just nice, because really the mother in the home controls everybody's mood. And I'm not saying I was great at it all the time, because there was definitely times where I was off, not feeling it, not living. I have 5 kids in 6.5 years. That was a lot to take on, especially married to a workaholic. So a lot of it fell on me for the daily stuff. And it was easy sometimes to kind of slip into bitterness, or, poor me, or, oh, this sucks, But I just had to work through that stuff and just be like, you know what? The kids are the most important thing right now. And I need to fix my face, fix my face, fix my mood, suck it up. This is what when they say parenting is hard, because you have to put yourself aside and sacrifice. It's sacrifice.
It's almost like the sacrifice is its own form of accountability, where you really and it is a good measure of what you're putting out there too.
Yeah, like when they say, and I did hear this perspective. I mean, not to get like all religious, but Christ sacrificed everything. The next closest sacrifice there is being a mother, because you really do. You sacrifice your physical body, your daily 24/7. It's not just like a clock in, clock out thing. It is 24/7. And I'm finding now, like, you're 26, I'm finding that it never ends. Like, my dad would say all the time, oh, when you guys are 18, you're out of the house and I'm off the hook. It's like, that is not reality, like, at all. You are a parent forever. So if you think your kids are just going to move out and you're going to stop parenting them someday, you're kidding yourself. But that's okay. Like, you sign up and you love these people more than anything. It's just remembering that. It all goes, like I said, back to love and then sacrifice.
And again, it's that that principle of, the love and the sacrifice. It's what's going to keep you accountable from your own BS. Because if you're doing that stuff, like, you don't have the bandwidth, more or less, to be, like, if you're loving appropriately and if you're sacrificing appropriately, you're not going to have the bandwidth for
playing a victim
for mistakes, for anything like that. And you can't, and when you have that mentality, you can't blame it on anything other. Like, if you have a situation where it's like, oh, hey, I'm, especially when you look at kids nowadays, they're like, I'm this way, I have the anxiety, the depression because of how I was raised. It's like, you have that because you aren't sacrificing or loving enough. And this is the measure to keep you accountable.
Well, the rule of thumb is, when you're really feeling down about yourself and your situation, say, something really bad, like you lost your job or it's not going well or something, the best way to get out of that funk is to go do service for somebody else with expecting nothing in return. It works every time. Why is that? Because love and sacrifice are the one thing that we need to be doing. And the more you can do it, and it's so true, like in Pinal County, take this for example, like Mark and I we literally love the people of Pinal County. When I go to Walmart, I love those people. When I go to QT or wherever, I love those people. Like, they're my people because we serve those people. If you serve people, you will love them. And so then you take how much service do you do for your own children? Everything. So how much do you love them? As deep as you can, as deep as possible, as you possibly can. So putting yourself aside and finding that place where you can love and sacrifice, that's going to pull you out of a lot of funky stuff, because our brains love to play tricks on us. Our brains will sit there and tell us, you're justified in feeling this way or that way. No. Replace it with love and sacrifice.
So what was you just recently wrote a second book. What was kind of the premise in that next one?
So Bravery and Blinders one is mainly what I've learned through what we've lived through over the last, 7 years being in the public eye, Mark being the sheriff, all this stuff. You have to learn to tune out the negativity, tune out hard stuff that doesn't affect you, and go forward with what you know you need to be doing. It's so hard to do, but tuning out the noise and the negativity, if you can do that and do what's on your heart to do, you'll be fine.
I really like Dad's brown rice theory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's something that we talk about all the time. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So it was actually came from a experiment, and I'm going to butcher the guy's name. So it's a Japanese scientist. They take 3 bowls of rice, and you can have them in Tupperwares. And you can find this on YouTube. They do it all the time. It's really cool. You cook the rice, so there's water in it, and that's kind of the premise behind it is water takes on the form. But and the rice kind of shows it. So 3 bowls of rice, the one you label, I love you, you're beautiful. The other bowl you label, I hate you, you're ugly. And the third bowl, you just ignore it. And so after 30 days, you pick up each bowl, each 2 of the bowls, and the other one you just completely ignore. You tell it every day, I love you, you're beautiful, or I hate you, you're ugly, ignore the third bowl. By the end of 30 days, the one that you picked up and said, I love you, you're beautiful, has a little bit of goo on it, nothing too crazy. The one that you told was ugly, I hate you, you're ugly, will be brown and grody and a little moldy. The bowl that you ignored will be by far moldier, dirtier, more rotten than the other 2. And the point of that exercise is ignoring something is much worse than even saying you hate it or you love it. So we took that philosophy and we applied it to politics and things we don't like in our lives. Like we're just like, you know what? Shut it out because it's not important. Ignoring something is much worse. And you see this with kids. I mean, kids that were neglected are much worse off than kids that were abused because at least they were getting some sort of human interaction. The kids that were neglected just have a really hard time because our bodies are made up of water. So that concept is like a universal basic. So how we use it in politics is, and we will continue to go forward this way, we just ignore the opponent. We ignore the negativity. We don't read the bad articles. We don't say the people's names. That's it. It's out. And it usually drives those people crazy. And what happens is they work themselves up because they just want the attention. They want your stage. They want your validation or whatever it is. And if you don't give it to them, it drives them bananas. It's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in a Senate race. But we're going to keep doing it. It's going to be crazy because it's worked in the past. It has worked in the past. So,
and that's not to say that you're denying reality. You're not unaware of what is out there, what the pressures are.
Oh no, we know what they say.
The responsibilities
we know what's going
and the
on.
obligations. Yeah. Like you have reality in front of you. You know exactly what's going on. It's just the deliberate decision to apply energy here or there.
Exactly.
Or where
and
it
if
needs
you
to
don't
go.
give it your energy, it can't survive.
It sounds kind of hippy-dippy, but it's so true.
It's so true. And those experiments are really cool to watch on YouTube because there's hundreds of them.
Well, I know there's one that's pretty popular from is it a documentary or a movie? What the bleep do we know?
What the bleep do we know? I love that.
Yeah.
Quantum physics. Yeah.
And I think that one, it talks a little bit more about the crystallization of water molecules doing the same kind of experiment. And
right.
I believe they do it with like music and stuff and different kind of just any sort of outside influence on what you can apply to a water molecule, whether it just be anything from sound blasting, frequencies, music, words.
And so when you consider that we're made up of so much water, it completely makes sense. It's like people who sing to their plants. Like those plants do better. That's proven. If you play good, wholesome music for your plants, they're going to do better. It's just the way it goes.
Or your kids.
And I think that's why we fight so hard to protect our kids from evil things. You know what I mean? We try to protect them from the internet. We try to protect them from evil people and bad influences and like rated R movies and all that kind of stuff because that stuff's important. It matters. It does.
Well, I mean, even whether it's like a positive or negative effect, like it does shape their development every way. Like I remember when we lived in Payson and we had that downstairs area in the armoire with the TV and all that. And I remember I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And watching Predator.
You were so scared.
It was awesome. And I remember specifically when Carl Weathers gets his arm shot off and it's still shooting, and Dad kind of explaining it to me like, oh yeah, these guys are the G.I. Joes and they're going after that thing. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, badass. Like that's
so wrong that you were watching that.
But when you look at it now, what it's kind of, I mean, that's, I'm not saying that is a bad thing or a good thing. We're advocating that small children should be watching Predator while it is
I'm
definitely
going to
classic.
just make a statement that small children should not be watching Predator.
But I would say that whole, like it's a little bit more like that nurture versus nature thing, but you got kids that play with Hot Wheels or Transformers or Barbies or whatever, G.I. Joes into like, oh yeah, that Predator movie, into, what I've since done.
And look at you. It influenced that, and Dad playing the Green Beret song for you pretty much every night before you went to bed. Both of those things, I think, influenced your course of music. There you go. There's another good example, hearing that song so much and feeling like it was so heroic and so noble and something you really, really wanted to do.
Well, Sergeant Barry Sadler did not miss with that song. But for those listening, when I was a kid, we all shared a room. Like it was really just the 3 older kids. We shared a room, and my mom made us each like burned us CDs, like mixtape CDs, and they were the exact same songs on all of them. She just wrote on Sharpie.
Yep.
Different.
Well, those are the days.
And one of them had the Ballad of the Green Beret, and we would listen to. And at first, like I think when we were little, we thought it was like goofy. It was like kind of like goose stepping, marching, and like it's got the snare drum and everything. But that played at least once every night for years and years as I was a kid, and I eventually joined the Army to become a Green Beret. We basically
indoctrinated you
Pretty
through
much.
that CD. I wonder what else was on there.
I don't know. Unfortunately, I didn't become a Green Beret, but I did have
You're definitely in that realm.
I had a time in the airborne, and jumping out of planes, silver wings, and the whole bit.
Yep.
Almost there.
It just shows you, I don't know what percentage of nature versus nurture there is, but I do believe that there's a balance. And I think some people they lean more towards the nature and some more towards the nurture. It just depends on your personality.
And it's so weird too, because we were all raised pretty much the same. Like with your siblings, you and your brothers are a decade plus older than your youngest 3 siblings.
Right.
And that the dichotomy of how you guys were raised, country bumpkin, backwoods in Minnesota. And when I say backwoods in Minnesota, like it's we go up there all the time in the summer, and it is redneck. It's
great.
It's great, but it is swampy northern Minnesota. Like, if you ever seen the movie Fargo, it's Fargo.
Yep.
And so going from that, and then having these 3 girls that were raised in the 90s in, probably upper middle, high class,
yep.
Mesa, Arizona, Mountain View, like it was, which is, was the epicenter of what white people at the time, like white Mormon people at the time.
Basically.
Like if you had money, and if you were, well-to-do, and then you lived in that area of Mesa, Arizona, and that was kind of like the hub. And so dramatically different. But with us, we were also close in age, and we all kind of hit everything at the same time, except probably a little bit later, less so, just because of the dramatic culture shift between when I was in high school to when like Wyatt and Dayton were in high school.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
that was
you
pretty,
and Dave, and I mean, not just the times had changed, but like our family had changed. Like we went from Mark just being in law enforcement to being the sheriff. Like that's a
Right.
totally different situation. Like your dad's on TV, dude. That's so cool. Like you didn't have that,
no.
but that's what Dayton had.
Yeah. It's strange though because of how dramatically different we are.
Mm-hmm.
Just even us siblings. Like, for example, me and Cooper
Yeah.
could not be more different people. I'm like 6'2", 240, and lift weights and did the Army and music and this. Cooper was, if you could imagine the complete opposite of that, that was him.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of that is birth order. And I don't know how much of that is just personality, just how you're born. Like there's so many factors that go into it. But that is also another thing that helps me sleep at night, basically, is knowing that my kids were all raised the same and they're going to turn out completely the same. And they're from the same two people. Everybody has their own unique ability, their own unique something to offer this world. You can't force it on them. You can't say, well, just because me and dad are this way, you should be this way. Like that's, I think that's actually more harmful to kids than letting them do their own thing. You know, it's such a balance of teaching them, okay, these are consequences, hold them to consequences that are, what's the word, appropriate. And then not expecting them to be something that they're not going to be. You can't do that. It just, it creates hard feelings. It's just easier to just love your kids.
Appropriately within the boundaries of your home, though.
Yeah, like,
because like you could, I mean, what you said is exactly true, but I feel like that is being, you know, people are extrapolating from that into a lot of problems that are rising up today, where you're like, oh yeah, well, you end up letting your kids run the house or
right.
not have
So like,
consequences.
and I feel like the punishment has to fit. So like, say your kid is, you know, not turning in their phone at night like they're supposed to. Okay, you lose your phone. You lose your phone for a week or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it has to go together. Like you didn't come home on time and you didn't let me know where you were and, you know, you let me worry, whatever. Okay, well, now you're grounded.
Right.
For however bad you messed up, you're grounded for a weekend, 2 weekends, whatever it is, you know, like appropriately dished out.
Now, what about, because I mean, obviously, like you said, you can't really dictate how your kid is going to turn out.
No.
But would you say there is a nature versus nurture aspect into some of the problems that you see with kids that are, you know, doing the whole trans thing? Like, is that I mean, obviously, that's a home problem.
I kind of disagree. I feel like that's a society problem.
Just straight up society?
I think it's a society problem. I think that everybody wants to belong. And I write about this a little bit in Motivational Blinders too. Every human being wants to belong. Now, back in the day, we all had one thing in common, and that was what? That we were children of God. You all knew that no matter if you were a doctor or a garbage truck driver, a parent, not a parent, whatever you were a child of God. Well, now I feel like society has really tried to erase God as much as possible. Okay, so now maybe you're part of a family. Well, what's happening to our families? Also getting erased. So now you have these kids who are out, who innately, their human nature is to want to belong. And it's so easy now to be like the trans kids at high school are the cool kids. You can stand out because you can say, I'm a cat and I need a litter box in our school cafeteria or bathroom, whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's how they're trying to belong, is they're trying to do this. And there's so many evil forces that are exploiting that. And then you add the social media aspect on it where people are only showing the good part. They're not showing, you know what they're not showing trans kids? Botched bottom surgery. They're not showing kids what happens when I turn 25 or 26 and I come to my senses and I've altered myself, mutilated my body, and now I realize, oh, my parent was actually just virtual singling me since I was 3, and now I want to do it right. And I can't now. They're not showing all that stuff. They're not showing any of the follow. They're not showing the negative. They're just showing like this beautiful looking person who used to be a boy and is now a girl and is wearing the cutest outfit, prancing around. That's appealing to their basic need to belong to something, and they think, I can do that. So, and I think that's where the society comes in, where it's just so deeply influencing these kids. And then the parents that are falling into it, like I said, are just they're wanting to seem like they're inclusive. I'm an ally. I'm here for you. I love you. I'll be there when your parents aren't. There's enough people that are doing that on purpose with evil intentions, and then these other parents are just like falling into the trap of it. I'm not saying that everybody who's advocating for their trans child is a bad person. I'm just saying I think we need to take a really hard look at what is really behind all of this, and helping our kids learn from an early age, from baby infanthood, of who they are. I mean, these parents who are like, I'm not telling anybody if my child's a boy or a girl. They're starting there. Like, it's so deeply disturbing. They're not even giving him their gender identity anymore. So now they're really going to be confused. And then it's just even easier to manipulate down the road. So we've taken out our belonging, and now people are just belonging to like what the heck ever. And that's where society has failed our kids.
You know what it makes me think of is, and we just watched this a few weeks ago, is that South Park episode with the Mormon family.
Yeah.
And, you know, they walk in, if you haven't seen it, it's confusingly hilarious.
It's confusingly spot on, actually. And I'm a person who can, laugh at myself or my own ideology. I'm fine with that. I get it. It's funny.
It's hilarious. Yeah. But they walk in the door, and he's one of the South Park kids. He's going over the Mormon kid's house, and they just have this love. Oh, hey, who's your friend? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Hey,
inclusive,
welcome home.
Yeah.
Every single person
over.
in the family, every single person in the family is deeply invested in, oh, hey, how's your day? Who's your new friend? Blah, blah, blah. And it's that genuine interest. Mm-hmm. And, he goes back home, and then he's like, and it's like his sister's like, shut up, turd. It's that sense of belonging. And, in the episode, the same thing happens, and they're like, oh, well, our family's Mormon now. And this isn't, one of those, like, you and I, our family, we're very religious, and we're very religious people, and that's, a pretty trademark of who we are, and it's actually helped us through a lot, especially recently. But, that's the same kind of thing that the transit, but it's what is going to sustain and protect, I think, about from those influences is when you can create a space, not necessarily a safe space, but you can create a space to where it doesn't even need to be your kids, but just anybody who's important to you can fall back and know that they're loved and accepted on correct principles. And when I say correct principles, I mean the things that, I don't know.
Well, like that we're all created.
Yeah.
We're all created by God. We all have that in common. And I think even that most basic common ground, you can pretty much love anybody on that. There's some people that are very unlovable out there in the world. They're really evil, and they're really trying to do harm to others. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about, meet people where they're at. And that's one thing we always try to make in our home too. I mean, your friends, don't you remember all those nights that those weekends? I remember one weekend you had 2 TVs.
It was 4 TVs.
4 TVs, all the controllers, all the Xboxes or PlayStations or whatever it was, the pizza, the cooler full of Mountain Dew. You guys took over the loft. There was like 15, 20 bikes parked outside our front door. And I wanted that atmosphere. I wanted our house to be where the kids could come. And we've had multiple friends of our kids, especially our boys, come live with us. Like literally live with us, be part of our family, go on vacation, have Christmas, hey, it's your birthday, all that stuff, because showing love is the most important part. And kids naturally gravitate towards that.
What were things that you guys were specific in doing in creating that atmosphere?
Well, even when we were first married, before we had any kids, Dad would say, when I was in high school, me and my friends would come to our house. We would heat up lunch back when they used to have open, lunchtime where you could open campus, whatever, you could leave school to go eat. Come to the house, eat a sandwich, make some, bagel bites, whatever, be at the house, and then go back to school. He's like, that's the kind of environment I want at my house. I want to have us have all the snacks, open kitchen, come over and hang out, crash on the floor, wherever, spend the weekend here, because at least we know where you are. We'd rather have everybody at our house. And believe me, there were some Saturday mornings I would wake up and I'd be like, what the crap happened in here? It's cups everywhere and pizza boxes and random socks. And I mean, it was trashed. I'm like, it literally looks like a frat party in here. But I knew that at least everyone was safe. Everyone was here. There was no real weird crap going on. Nobody was drinking. Like everything was at least good, even if it was a mess. I had to really talk myself through that sometimes.
Yeah.
Big mess.
And
it's worth it.
And that didn't stop for probably 10 years?
Yeah.
15?
Probably. Yeah. Because it started with you and ended with Dayton, and you figure, yeah.
Did it really end with Dayton?
Not really.
No.
And then with Wyatt was here longer than Dayton, and Wyatt's friends had been here. That's just how it goes.
Well, and you still have kids coming in and out.
Yeah, for sure. And I love it. I like, because you get to know who your kids' friends are. You get to know them personally. I want to know who's hanging out with my kids. So there's the sacrifice. You love everybody. You sacrifice your clean house on a Saturday because you wake up to a mess. And then you get up and you make everybody clean it up. But that's a lot of work too, just to get everybody going, make everybody clean it up. And that's what we did. And because you're trying to teach people consequences, like you're not just going to come in here and make a mess, get up and clean. That was some of the stuff, just really wanting to make our home a place where all the kids wanted to be.
Now, in dealing with 5 kids of your own, their troubles, and some of them were pretty significant. It wasn't just like, you got bad report cards, but I mean, you guys dealt with some serious stuff. And then also having the neighborhood kids that you were more or less, I mean, like you said, there were a handful that have literally lived with you guys. You're developing all these kids. What were you doing throughout all of that? And not just that, but also supporting your husband, who is gone from workaholic into public office and public eye, and still a workaholic. You're putting yourself out. You're just turning outward as much as possible. I mean, 24/7. How do you take what were you doing? What do you do to take to take a look at yourself and say, here's where I need to develop, here's where I need to improve, and this is what I need as far as my personal development goes?
So I had to go to some therapy. I think therapy can be really, really great. And one thing I learned through that was I need creativity. I just need creative time. So I remember one time, the lady I was talking to, she had assigned me, I'd been collecting these plates for a long time. And I'm like that Southern mom type like decor, right? So home decor, we're talking home decor. And I collected all these plates, and I had them for probably a year and a half. And she asked me, what projects are you working on that you haven't finished? And I told her about the plates. I said, I've got these plates. I want to hang them on the wall. And she goes, okay, your assignment this week is to hang those plates on the wall, because you have to, put the big one in the middle, and you have to have golden rule of threes, make it look aesthetic, this whole thing, and actually get something done. And I realized in that time that that's what I need. I need to be able to do something creative and aesthetic. So a lot of what helped me, which is kind of weird, and I didn't know it at the time, was when I was doing hair. That's a very creative and aesthetic thing to do. So I was helping people, but I would, be able to make someone brighten up their blonde, or, give them a cute new haircut or something. So that, to me, that really fulfilled that for me. When I kind of stepped away from doing that, I kind of lost that creative stuff. So then I did the plate wall. Do you remember the plate wall over the TV?
Yeah.
In the other house? So that was one of my projects, was to do that. It was like blues and greens and coordinating the colors. And so really, when I find myself starting to feel off, doing something creative and aesthetic, either decorating an area of my house, or, I've got coloring pages I can do, or just making something beautiful. That's what heals me, is making something beautiful.
That's what heals you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do for, and is it the creative outlet that allows you the reflection of like, okay, here's my next goal in my, like, who I am and want to become?
Yeah. So I think what my trajectory is right now. So I loved it when I was doing hair and someone would come in my chair and they either, their color was grown out. You're just starting to feel, frumpy or ugly or whatever, not your best. And they could sit in my chair and I could fix up their hair, put a tiny bit of makeup on them, whatever. And they would leave just glowing. Excuse me. So what I've realized is I don't have really time to do that anymore. I can't be doing hair. Like, I just don't have it in my bandwidth right now. But what I can do is I can write books, or if someone's maybe feeling a little like confused or off or in need of some guidance, because that was a lot of what goes into doing hair, to be honest. It's like a personal therapy session for both of you. I wrote my books. And so it's the perfect like creative outlet that's hopefully helping people. I mean, the feedback I've gotten has been great, that people felt encouraged, or like, hey, I wanted to do this. Now that I read your book, I'm going to go do it. That kind of stuff. That fulfills me. And now taking it to a bigger level where I'm actually speaking to groups of people. So instead of going one-on-one, or then me going silently to a group of people through my books, now I'm leveling it up to speaking to groups of people. So it's like a group think. It's like I've got a group of people in my chair. So that's kind of how it's progressing, as far as a creative outlet where I'm sharing my heart and we're kind of all in this together, sort of thing. So it's really fulfilling.
Is there a common theme that you like to talk about when you do these like seminars?
Yeah. So I feel like people really want to hear your story. So depending on the group, like this coming weekend, we're doing, I'll be talking to sheriff's wives. So I'll probably go more to my first book sort of thing, like how I navigated specific challenges, because that's a pretty specific group. I feel like giving people some hope and relaying personal stories and how I did certain things. Like a couple weeks ago, I spoke to a group and talked about how, we're feeling so much stress, and how one of the hardest challenges we're going to face going forward is knowing what's real and what's not. With AI, with the trans movement, with all this stuff, like, you can't even believe what's in front of your eyes anymore. That's very stressful, to not be able to trust what you're seeing even anymore. I feel like it's going to be one of the biggest challenges of our society going forward. So how do we combat that? So I was just talking about how what you can do is you have to worry about what you can do. Like, okay, so say the economy is terrible, right? What can you do to alleviate some of your stress about that? Well, you can make sure you have enough food in your house. You can do things in your home to make sure that you're prepared. You can buy some seeds. You can, there's things you can do to help yourself not feel stressed. Like, think, if I had to go to Walmart, like, I wouldn't be able to go. Like, how can you fix that? So just taking it in small bites and bringing it down just to yourself. Because if the economy goes bad, who are you going to worry about? Your family. So taking care of that sort of stuff. And everyone does it. Everyone procrastinates. Oh, I need to get some food storage. Oh, I need to get some water storage. It's going to help you be less stressed if you know you have that. If you know you have that, how much stress is that going to take off your life when you hear all this craziness going on out in the world? That kind of stuff. So I just talked about like actionable things that you can do to help yourself not feel so stressed. Because really, what are you stressed about? You're stressed about the unknown. If you know that you're going to eat and your family's going to eat every day, you may not have electricity in your house, but you can go, you know, eat some of your MREs or whatever it is you've chosen to stock yourself up with. You know, you're going to be opening cans of soup. I mean, one time Mark's dad's family was in Panama and their power was out over Christmas and they literally had cold beans. It was a good thing they had beans. They had something they could open. So there's things you can do. So you kind of pinpoint what it is that's the hardest thing for you to be dealing with and fix that one thing.
We call that the 50-meter target.
Yeah.
Like what's right in front of you that you can hit, that's the most immediate threat
right.
that you can perceive. You know, have you ever seen the patch that I wore on the back of my helmet?
Mm-hmm.
It says, no one is coming. It's up to us.
Yes.
And I mean, that's kind of the whole premise of this podcast is like,
right.
you know, how do we take these different perspectives and subject matter experts and people of influence who, you know, can give people the actionable advice to where they can go out afterwards and say, here's how I'm going to make a change. Right. Here's how I'm going to affect my circumstances
mm-hmm.
and control the conditions right here, right now.
Like another one thing I was talking about was, say you're really stressed. Say your husband's in law enforcement or your spouse is in law enforcement and you think you're very stressed about what will happen if something happens to them. Okay, well, do you have life insurance? Like that's one thing that you could literally make a phone call tomorrow and by the end of the week, you can be set up with life insurance. How much less stressed are you going to be to know that if something happens to your spouse, $1 million is going to come into your bank account so you can do what you need to do, whether it's pay off your house, you know, take care of your kids, whatever it is, don't have to work, whatever it is. That's individual for everyone, but that's just like one thing. Like there's so many things that we can do to eliminate all those stresses that we just worry about at night. It's keeping you up at 3:00 in the morning.
Is there anyone that you know who can get someone set up with life insurance?
I would say me, but I'm not really affiliated with anybody right now. I am licensed, but yeah, but I do believe in it. I believe in it big time. It's just one less thing to worry about.
Now, if you were to give one piece of actionable advice to, let's just say, a parent who's listening to this podcast on how to develop themselves, their kids, and their homes a little bit better in the direction that they want to take it, what would you say to them?
Definitely what comes to mind first is communication. Setting the expectation and letting people just know where you stand. And I also saw another thing that really hit home to me was being vulnerable with your kids. Instead of taking the attitude of, I'm the parent, it's because I said so, everything I do is right, everything you do is wrong, listen to me, you have to listen to me. I think a lot of parents parent that way, and it's very easy to parent that way. No negotiation. And I did get tired of, I would get so sick of kids negotiating with me all the time. It's like, well, you're not going to go here, but why? Well, tell me why, this and that. There are times when you're just like, you're not going, that's it. But I always told you guys too, and I found a good time when it wasn't a tense time, when it wasn't a punishment time, to make sure you guys knew that if I ever say no to something, I'm not just ever going to do that just to be mean. There will be a reason. And I'll be straight up like, you're not going to go to the mall with your friends because none of your friends' parents are going to pick you up at 11 o'clock and I'm going to have to be the one to do that. And I have to work early in the morning and I'm not coming to pick you up at 11 o'clock. So you may not go. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with explaining that kind of thing to kids. And, and your kid may be like, oh, you're such a baby, and walk off and slam their door. I can't believe you won't let me go. But I do think that there is value in explaining sometimes. I don't think you have to explain everything, especially to the younger kids and stuff. But I feel like that kind of fosters some trust that kids need. They need to know that you're not just being mean. You're not just being a hard ass. You're not just, trying to make their life miserable. But when you talk about it and communicate about it at a time when it's not in a pressure cooker, then they'll remember. they'll remember, look, my mom's not trying to ruin my life. She just has X, Y, and Z, or, you know, whatever. And then you know what? Figure it out. Like make sure somebody else's parent will come get you.
Well, I think that was huge for me. Not even that I realized it, but you know, when you can show me that equation of like, hey, here's where we're at, here's where you want to be, and here's why that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you reverse that. Being able to see that function it made me like, oh, wait, when I'm going through, like, instead of having to come to you for the solution, I can come to that solution on my own.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, hey, I'm not going to go out with these guys because I don't have the logistical support to get there and get back and not have any problems. And whether that was just we were dumb and couldn't think through the situation, or if they were not trustworthy people I was going to be with and were going to dog me, which happened on multiple occasions.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's not foolproof, but I feel like when it just boils down to communication. If you have to communicate in order to build that trust. It is just to me, it is just lazy parenting to just be like, no explanation, just no. Okay, well, of course, anybody can just say no and just not care about how your kid feels and not care. I don't know if you remember this Brian Regan, but he had this really funny little bit. It was an old one where a little kid, he said, think about a 2-year-old and they lose their balloon and their balloon is flying up in the air. They can't comprehend that you can get another balloon. He's like, think about if it was you, if you were an adult and your wallet is just flying away, you would be upset. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the same kind of thing. It's like the perspective of a kid hanging out on a weekend night is their life. That is the only thing they are worried about. It's the only thing getting them through the week. And I think sometimes understanding that and not dismissing what's important to them is important. And if you can't make whatever it is happen, explain why. And sometimes just saying like, I'm too tired and I don't feel like it is enough reason. But just saying no and giving no context, I think is just lazy. Because it's definitely harder to be more vulnerable. It's definitely more work to sit there and have a conversation than it is just be like, no.
Well, and it's not just like, really parenting isn't just, parenting is the word because you're the parent or whatever, but it really reflects onto any form of a superior and someone
subordinate.
A subordinate.
Yeah.
How can you articulate and explain things functionally?
Well, it's leadership.
Exactly.
It's just leadership. And that's when you have to realize that you're leading a family and you're teaching them how to be in the world. And, kids sometimes need to understand like, hey, you know what? Mom and dad have a lot going on. They can't just be willy-nilly taking me wherever I want to go. And, my friend's dad, he'll do this and this and this. It's like, you have to, and that's where, again, communication, it's like you have to help your kids understand what sometimes you're up against. Do you need to explain to them like, hey, I've been doing my income taxes all day and I'm really stressed out? No, you don't necessarily do, but you can. They should be a part of everything that's going on in the family. I think it can't hurt. And then maybe they'll be like, seeing what you're doing and be like, oh, that looks really terrible. Maybe now is not a good time to ask if I can go to the water park.
Now, how have you been able to apply that to more emotional undertakings as well?
Oh, definitely. Like, again, if you have that trust, if you've built that trust, it's like a bank account. So you put deposits in the bank account of positive trust things, activities, either things you've shared or one thing I wish we would have done better was share more stories from our childhood. I feel like my dad kind of did a lot of that and I thought it was kind of dumb at the time. And I almost went the opposite way and didn't do it at all. So now I feel like I can tell you guys probably 10 stories that you've never heard that were like pretty big things from my childhood. Same with dad. Like we'll tell you something, you'll be like, I'd never heard that. And I'm like, we probably never told him. So I think they get to know you on a level when you share that stuff. And I think that's good to let them know like, hey, I wasn't a perfect kid. And I think if you tried something, like did something illegal or did something wrong, I don't necessarily think that's going to give your kid like, well, my dad did it and he didn't, he's fine now. depends on the kid. You know, some kids are
Mhm.
going to take that as a permission, and other kids are going to be like, "Ooh, I never want to do that." You got to use some judgment there.
Yeah. Was there anything on those lines that kind of prepped you for dealing with some of the bigger impacts that you've had recently?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing. I mean, you're referring to like Cooper passing away and stuff.
Well, Judy Cooper.
Yeah, we had a lot of loss in the family, and I feel like it still just comes back to having each other's backs. And when you've built a trustworthy working relationship, like you guys as adult kids were amazing. And here you are hurting. And they say that the surviving siblings are the forgotten victims. I feel like we really pulled together as a family and really, really embraced our roles. Like for you, like I was able to say to you, hey, Caroline's family needs some love. Will you please here's their address. Take care of it. And within like an hour, taken care of. Dad and I kept getting separated at the viewing. And Sadie saw that and just planted herself right next to me. Like Zach took Brody, they went and did their thing, and she just planted herself next to me just to be there. She was answering the door when people would come, just that kind of stuff. Wyatt was like my gopher boy. Like anything I needed, Wyatt, can you go grab some ice? Wyatt, can you go pick up this? Wyatt, can you drop this off? Like, and he was like, yep, done. He just did it, whatever needed to be done. Everybody just like stepped up. And that's what's hard is when you have something really hard happen, just to see where everyone's going to land. And I was very encouraged to see that all of our kids really rallied around us as their parents. And we just like stuck together. It was really, really great.
Do you think there's anything particularly that developed that you guys did to develop that? I mean, unknowingly or retrospectively?
I think retrospectively, I would say, because I mean, you can't ever really know.
Right.
But I feel like as a family, we did really foster a sense of who we were as a family. And I would say if I had to sum it up in one word, it's helpers. Like we're always dragging you guys out to service projects and always, just stepping up and helping when there's a need. And that's one thing that our family is one of our main cornerstones of our family is just being servants. It's kind of really, started with Dad, and then me kind of as the support person almost does more than the person who's in the spotlight, keeping it all together. And then you guys saw that as an example of like, hey, when somebody needs something, you got to go help them. I mean, even like Sadie, she's been bringing she's had several friends have some really hard times. And I feel like every other time I talk to her, she's making a meal for somebody and taking it. Or, and like when you were in Fort Bragg and you were doing your elders quorum thing at church, and you were always driving someone here, taking someone to the hospital, picking somebody up at the airport. Like there's always just something that needs to be done. And I feel like that's one thing that our family has really identified with. And I love that. I think that's great. And I don't know if we really did it on purpose, but we kind of just like corralled you guys along with us and you just learned how to do it.
Right. If you were to make a bigger effort to develop that, let's say, there's a house.
I got a do-over?
Like a do-over, or, if there's a young family out there trying to develop that, whether it's, an individual with themselves or with parents trying to make better kids, right? In developing that helper mentality. How do you do that?
Well, it doesn't even have to be a helper mentality. I would say take your strong points, what you stand for as people. And to be honest, most people don't even know what they stand for as people. Like, who are you? What does someone think of when they think of you? Do they think of someone who's a helper? Do they think of someone who, is a hard worker? Or, what do they think of you when they see you? Or, or someone says, oh, hey, do you know so-and-so? What do you think of when you think of that person? What do people think of if somewhere else were to mention your name? And then take those strong suits, the things that you're good at, and you can even write it down, a family mission statement, or, really dial in what it is you want your kids to, the values, like maybe pick 3 core values: trustworthiness, or, or hard work, or, whatever it is. Really pick those things, and really any opportunity you have to teach your kids those things, that's what you do. And it's hard work.
Well, that probably is the first step, like you said, is just like saying to yourself, oh, wait, what are those things?
Yeah. What is important to you? And maybe it's something you want to better in yourself. Maybe you want to be known more as like a super duper honest person. Maybe that's really important to you. So what you first have to do is be an honest person, and then take the opportunity to show your kids what it's like to be an honest person. And sometimes you got to, share experiences with them. Hey, this happened. I realized I had this pack of water in the bottom of my cart and they didn't ring me up. So your kids are with you. Guess what? You walk your happy butt back into Target and you scan the water. They see that stuff. They pick up on that stuff. That's how you instill the values, by doing those things. You can't just sit there and talk at your kids. They have to physically walk back into the store with you, go through the pain in the butt of dealing with it. And that makes an impact.
Would you say that Cooper's incident was probably the biggest exercise of that?
For sure. I mean, I don't know how to, I hope this is okay to say, but when we found ourselves in a place of need, like extreme need, our community stepped up 1,000,000-fold on us, for us. Not everybody had that same experience. So it was a very obvious example of you reap what you sow. If you don't have a network of people, if you haven't ever served anybody, if you don't know who your neighbors are, if you don't go to church and have a church community, when something really bad happens to you and nobody knows you and you have offered nothing, you're not going to get anything back. Like I said, it's like a bank account. You have to make deposits in that bank account, because there's going to be a time where you're going to need, and you're going to have to make a withdrawal. There's got to be something in the tank. Another example, I was so happy to hear, I wasn't happy to hear, but another person in our neighborhood lost their life. A young man, 2 streets over, was killed in a motorcycle crash with a semi. He was on the motorcycle. Young kid, I think he was 23 or something. Wasn't married, didn't have kids, but his family lives here in this neighborhood. Well, he worked for Home Depot, and Home Depot just stepped up. Like, they were great. But if he didn't have that support, and he had parents and he had family and whatever, but there's just such a huge difference when you see like Walmart came and brought us like anything we needed. We've been doing Shop with the Sheriff to help needy families at Walmart for 8 years. So we've been depositing into that bank account. They knew us. Like, when the manager of Walmart texts me, she doesn't have to go looking for my number. She already has it. We've been texting for years. So it's just, you're going to get out of life what you put into it. And the same goes for when something really bad happens, like our personal family tragedy. And you don't do it because you want something in return. You just do it because you just never know. You do it because that's what people need. Families in our community have needed help at Christmas time, and it's one of our favorite things is to go and help them do that. And then it just happens to be that and you never think it's going to be you, but then here you are.
What do you think has gotten you through some of these family tragedies, particularly Cooper's, in the last few months, and gotten you to the point where you're at now?
Well, we know for a fact that Cooper is not physically alive, but he is alive. And our little granddaughter Lane is alive. Like, they exist. They're not here on earth with us, but they exist. Just from, what we know through our church or whatever, that we have a life before this life. We come here to get a body and to make choices. And then we move on. We just move into a new existence after this. And it's a whole thing. And it's much better than this life, I truly believe. So knowing that, I miss them. Like, I miss them. And I miss the baby. And I miss thinking, I think things all the time like, she'd be talking. She'd be saying grandma, things that are really sad. So it's okay to be sad. It's a sad thing. But what gets both Dad and I up every day is knowing that they're okay. And if I didn't have that knowledge, and when I say knowledge, it's like I don't just believe it or I just kind of think it, like things that I've experienced since they passed away, I just know that they're here for us. I just feel it. I can feel it. And that's part of, this is going to sound really cheesy, but it's part of just living a clean life and being in touch with my spiritual side, is that's how I feel it. In case someone's wondering, like, well, how do you say you feel it? Well, I feel it because I feel the spirit. I feel spiritual about it. And so I know that they're in a good place. And what else do you ever want for your kids but them to be in a good place and to be happy and safe? And that's where they are. It doesn't lessen really the sadness I feel, especially about the baby, or just seeing what kind of dad Cooper was going to be, or all those things. That's what you're sad about, is you're sad that you didn't get your expectations met. Because that's what it is, really. You expected to watch this child of yours grow to be a man and an adult and a dad and probably a grandpa. We don't get that now. That got taken away from you. So that's totally worthy to be sad over. But I'm so comforted by knowing where they are. And I'm also comforted, still everywhere we go, any state we go to, any airport we go to, any event we go to, people are constantly coming up to us, hugging us, saying, I'm so sorry for your loss. We've been praying for you. How are you doing? And it's very sincere. You can feel that sincerity. And having the people of Arizona, the people of the United States, honestly, people all over the world lifting us up in prayer, that is very impactful to us personally. So if you feel like praying for someone and then you want to tell them about it, do it. They might look a little funny at you. I promise it's good. It's a good thing.
That's pretty heavy.
It is.
It's good though. I think a lot of people need to hear it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people dealing with loss and who don't have the support. Even, with Cooper's fiance, Carol, just the stark contrast between our experience through it and theirs.
They just didn't have the community
piece of the family.
And now but you know what's crazy though? They have developed that community.
Yeah.
People have rallied around Caroline's mom. What's really crazy is people that were there at the scene of the accident have been to her home and been with her and made friends with her and hug her and check in on her. So through this, she has developed a community. Now, what's our responsibility? Now that when we see somebody with a need, now I'm going to know exactly what to do. I'm going to know most likely exactly what they're going to need. So I use that as a blessing as well.
Well, Mom, thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It was, we covered just about anything that we could.
Yeah.
Or that anybody would need to hear from you right now. And I think this is going to be the longest podcast so far too.
Mm. Well, we're both talkers. They always, have you heard that thing saying, the oldest son is always a version of his mom?
No.
I think we're most alike. I think we're very alike. We're both talkative and
well,
very
thank
alike.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. If you want to support the show, go to fearnottoright.com. You can pick up merch. And until next time, fear not and do right.